The stars looked different from the prison cell. Elias Vance used to love watching them, each one a promise, a whisper of discovery. Now they hung above him like cold, distant eyes watching as years bled together in that alien cage. The universe he once dreamed of exploring had turned into his warden. He had been the first human officer to step onto the Karthan frontier, a border world on the edge of human expansion. That was 10 years ago, or maybe 11. The Karthan kept no clocks he could read, and time lost its edges after the first few years of captivity. Elias had once been Captain Vance of the Endurance, a research vessel. When the Karthan fleet descended, humanity's outpost burned in a storm of blue fire. He'd been captured during the evacuation, a lone survivor dragged from the wreckage of his ship. At first he thought he would die within weeks, but death, it turned out, was a luxury the Karthan didn't offer easily. They called their prison the Chamber of Stillness. It was built from seamless white stone that pulsed faintly like living skin. Inside, Elias had no contact, no sounds except the rhythm of his own breath, no language he could understand, no faces that stayed long enough to remember. The Karthan were tall and silver-skinned, their eyes like liquid glass. They spoke in chimes and light, and their world was built on harmony that did not include humans. Yet Elias refused to break. He talked to himself, sang old Earth songs into the walls, recited poems he half-remembered from childhood. He carved days into the floor with a shard of his broken meal dish until even that was taken away. When the silence became unbearable, he whispered to the stars beyond the slit in the ceiling. "If anyone's out there," he'd murmur, "I'm still alive. Don't let them forget us." He didn't know who he was talking to, maybe the universe itself. The turning point came on the 3912th day, though Elias didn't know it at the time. That was when they brought another prisoner, a creature unlike any he'd seen before. It was small, no larger than a child, with translucent skin and eyes that shimmered like amethyst light. The guards shoved it into the cell across from him, bound in the same energy cuffs he wore. It made a sound, a trembling hum that seemed almost sad. For the first time in years, Elias spoke words meant for another living being. "Hey there, you okay?" The creature tilted its head, studying him. It didn't understand the words, but something in his tone made it pause. It hummed again, softer this time, like an echo of comfort. Over the following weeks, Elias began to communicate. He mimed. He drew shapes in the dust. The creature, he called it Lira, learned faster than any human child could have. They built a bridge of sound and symbol, a fragile thread of understanding. And when the guards came, when they tried to hurt Lira for refusing orders, Elias lunged at them. He didn't win, he never could, but something changed in that moment. For the first time, the Karthan seemed uncertain they didn't execute him. Instead, they moved him and Lira together, into a larger chamber lined with humming crystal walls. There, strange machines surrounded them, and Elias began to see flickers of memory that weren't his own. Images of alien worlds, of Lira's people, of an empire torn apart by the same Karthan he hated. It was then he understood he wasn't the only prisoner. Years passed. The walls became teachers and the silence became language. Elias learned that the Karthan's domination wasn't total. There were others, thousands of species under their rule. Some whispered rebellion, others dreamed of freedom. And through that understanding, something new began to grow inside him. Not just the will to survive, but a purpose. He would not die here. He would not be forgotten. He would return. And when he did, he wouldn't return alone. As the alien night drifted by, Elias stood beneath the narrow slit of stars and whispered to the dark once more, "Wait for me, Earth, just a little longer." For the first time in a decade, he felt something burn behind his ribs, something bright, something human. Hope. The first time Elias Vance heard Lira speak, truly speak, it was like hearing music bloom in the dark. Her voice wasn't made of sound, but of vibration, a sequence of harmonic pulses that shimmered across the air. The Karthan called it resonance. Elias had spent years listening to it through walls and corridors, never realizing it was a language, not just noise. Now, after months of trial and mimicry, she was shaping those harmonics into words that reached him, not through his ears but through his bones. "Elias," she resonated softly, the tones vibrating in his chest. "You stay, you not break," he smiled. The first genuine smile in years. Yeah, he said quietly. I stay. And one day, we go home. Lira tilted her small head, the light in her skin pulsing faintly blue. The color he'd learned meant curiosity. Home? Far. Yes, Elias answered, staring up at the slit of starlight above. But closer every day. Time became their shared rhythm. Elias taught Lira human words, and she taught him the patterns of resonance, the Karthan's own tool of control. What had once been a language of subjugation became a secret code between them. He learned how sound could bend light, how frequencies could open or seal the living walls. The Karthan had built their empire on vibration. They shaped matter, memory, even emotion with it. They believed only they could wield it properly. They were wrong. Elias's mind, dulled by years of solitude, sharpened again. He remembered his training, his science background, his human adaptability. He began experimenting when the guards were gone, testing tones against the walls, tracing their responses with careful precision. At first, nothing happened. Then, one night, a faint shimmer rippled through the floor when he matched one of Lira's harmonics. Lira gasped, her whole form glowing in astonishment. You felt it? She pulsed, trembling with excitement. Yeah, Elias whispered, stunned. I did. That night, something ancient inside him stirred. The part of humanity that refused to be caged. Weeks turned to months. Elias and Lira practiced in secret, building resonance maps of their chamber, tracing weak points. They used broken meal trays as reflectors, their breath as instruments. Their cell became a workshop of whispers and light. Then one day a sound shattered everything. The guards arrived earlier than usual. Their metallic boots struck the ground in rhythm, a rhythm Elias had learned to fear. One of them carried a dark device humming with deadly energy. Lira shrank back. Elias moved instinctively, stepping in front of her. What's happening? He demanded, though he knew they wouldn't answer. But one did. The smallest guard, his eyes dimmer than the rest, hesitated. He looked at Lira, then at Elias. For the briefest moment, Elias saw something human in those silver eyes. Then the device pulsed. Pain tore through Elias's body. But instead of screaming, he matched the vibration, an instinct he didn't know he had. He pushed against it with the sound Lira had taught him. A flash of light filled the chamber. The walls vibrated violently, then went still. The guards stumbled, their harmonic armor faltering. One fell, another dropped the device. Lira's voice cut through the air like a blade of pure sound. The device cracked open and silence followed. For the first time in 10 years, Elias realized they could fight back. After the guards were gone, perhaps killed, perhaps fled, Elias collapsed beside Lira. His chest burned, but his heart pounded with a rhythm he hadn't felt since Earth. He turned to her and whispered, voice raw, we can do this. She glowed a soft gold, the color of belief. Then we do. That night, they began to plan in earnest. They mapped the corridors through resonance echoes, learned the schedules of the guards through vibration patterns, and listened for other prisoners. The Karthan's prison, once a tomb of silence, had become a living network of voices waiting to awaken. Within weeks, Elias and Lira reached out through their cell walls, sending encoded harmonics through the structure, and one by one faint responses came. Voices, dozens, hundreds, different tones, different species. Each pulse said the same thing. In its own way, we hear you for the first time. Elias realized he wasn't leading a rebellion of one. The stars themselves were listening. When he closed his eyes that night, he could almost see it. The great arc of the galaxy beyond the cell, and humanity's blue world waiting in the dark. He whispered to Lira, when I get home, I'll tell them your name. I'll tell them what you did. Lira shimmered softly, resting a faintly glowing hand against his. When you go home, she said gently, we all go home. And Elias knew then that the Karthan's empire, built on silence, was about to tremble. It began with a single hum, soft trembling, barely more than a whisper. But in that endless hall of crystalline cells, even a whisper could change the world. Elias Vance stood at the center of the chamber of stillness. His palm pressed to the wall as the sound spread outward like ripples on a dark pond. The resonance traveled through the living stone, reaching cell after cell, touching the hearts of prisoners who had forgotten what freedom even meant. Lira stood beside him, her translucent form glowing brighter with every note. Her voice was no longer frail. It was powerful, beautiful, alive. "They answer," she said, her words flowing in shimmering harmonics. All of them. Elias could feel it. Thousands of tiny pulses, each a heartbeat of defiance. The prison itself had become a chorus of the oppressed. He took a slow breath. "This is it," he murmured. The first verse of the last song they'll ever forget. For days their secret grew. Each prisoner added their voice to the resonance, a living web of communication spreading through the Karthan stronghold. Species that had never seen one another now shared thoughts, hope, and courage through vibration and light. Some called Elias the speaker, others called him the rememberer, for he spoke of a world none of them had seen, a small blue planet where mountains breathed mist and oceans sang in thunder. When he spoke of Earth, the air itself seemed to listen. "We came to the stars to learn," he told them, "to share. But we forgot one thing. No matter how far we travel, we never lose what makes us human. We fight, we endure, and we forgive." The walls of the chamber glowed faintly in response, as if even the stone had begun to understand. The day of rebellion came without warning. The Karthan guards entered for their routine inspection, unaware that every surface around them had already been tuned, every panel, every corridor, every fragment of living stone vibrating with silent tension. Lira stood behind Elias, her energy flaring gold. She looked fragile, but her voice now carried the weight of 10,000 souls. "Are you ready?" she asked. Elias nodded once. "Let's wake the stars." He struck the wall with his fist. The sound that followed wasn't a scream or explosion. It was music, pure, resonant, unstoppable. The walls shivered, light burst from the seams, and the air turned to thunder. Karthan guards staggered, their armor cracking as the frequencies tore through their control systems. The resonance Elias had learned, stolen from them, now turned against them. Across the prison, cells burst open like seeds under spring rain. Creatures of every shape and color flooded the halls, beings of light, of smoke, of living stone. None were warriors, yet each carried the fury of survival. The Karthan shouted in their melodic tongue, trying to counter the frequencies, but the harmony had already been rewritten. Elias led the charge through the chaos, his bare feet echoing against the glowing floor. He didn't fight with weapons. He fought with sound. Every step, every heartbeat, every breath was part of the great song of freedom. When they reached the outer gates, Elias saw the world beyond for the first time in 10 years. The Karthan sky was vast and silver, streaked with auroras that shimmered like silk. Massive towers rose from the horizon, humming with the energy of an empire built on enslavement. Lira floated beside him, her body flickering from strain. "More will come," she said. "They will not stop." "I know," Elias replied, "but we're not done yet." He placed his hand on her shoulder and looked back at the thousands behind them, every prisoner who had joined the song. They looked at him with faith, with fear, with something that felt like destiny. "You've all suffered," he shouted, his voice amplified through the resonance. "They called us broken. They called us weak, but today we make them listen." The air itself roared with their answer. Together they released one final harmonic, so strong that the ground cracked and the towers bent. The Karthan sky pulsed white, and the prison's heart shattered like glass under the sound of freedom. When the echoes finally died, the Karthan world lay in stunned silence. Elias knelt beside Lira, who now glowed faintly like a fading ember. She smiled, tired but radiant. "You did it," she whispered. "You sang the song of the broken." He shook his head gently. "We did it. All of us." She reached up, her delicate fingers brushing his cheek. "Now, what comes next?" Elias looked up at the stars, millions of them glittering across the dark. "Now," he said softly, "now we build something new." He didn't yet know how. He only knew that the song wasn't over. It had just begun. The night after the prison fell was not silent. It was alive with the sound of freedom, the rustle of alien wings, the hum of creatures breathing unfiltered air for the first time in years, the low murmurs of disbelief that they were truly free. Elias Vance stood atop the shattered walls, the wind of an alien world brushing against his face. He had forgotten what open air felt like, forgotten the taste of wind, the cold on his skin, the sound of a sky unbounded by walls. Now it all came rushing back. Beside him, Lira hovered in quiet exhaustion. Her light had dimmed, her harmonics faint, but her eyes, those radiant amethyst eyes, glowed with pride. "They wait for you," she said softly. "All of them." Elias turned to see the crowd below, thousands of freed prisoners gathered beneath the broken towers, each one different yet bound by the same story of captivity. Creatures of smoke, beings of light, scaled giants, tiny fluttering intelligences, all looking at him as if he held their future. He felt the weight of their gaze. And yet, for the first time in a decade, he didn't feel alone. Elias descended from the wall, his steps slow, deliberate. When he spoke, he didn't shout. His voice carried because they wanted to hear it. "I'm not your leader," he began. "I'm one of you, a prisoner who learned that silence can be broken. But if you'll stand with me, if you'll fight, not for revenge, but for freedom, then maybe we can make sure no one ever feels a cage again." There was silence for a heartbeat, a living stillness, the kind that comes before a storm. Then one by one the beings around him lifted their voices in resonance, not in words, but in agreement. The sound rose until the sky itself seemed to sing. In the following days, Elias and Lira organized what remained. The prison's shattered systems became tools, the guards' technology weapons, the freed prisoners, the resonants, as Elias called them, rebuilt what they could, forging a base from the ruins. They learned that the Karthan Empire stretched across 1,000 systems. Its power was absolute, its rule merciless. For centuries, the Karthan had silenced worlds by erasing their voices, literally, by dampening their natural resonance frequencies, leaving species docile, compliant, empty. Elias's heart burned when he heard it. He knew what that kind of erasure meant. He'd lived it, but he also knew something the Karthan didn't. Humans had a peculiar gift, resilience through imagination. Even when stripped of everything, a human could dream, and those dreams could ignite others. So he began to teach. He gathered the resonance into circles under the alien auroras, teaching them to shape their harmonics not into weapons, but into hope. "You don't fight the Karthan by becoming like them," he told them. "You fight them by showing the galaxy what they tried to silence." They sang together, a wild, chaotic symphony of voices that shook the air and lit the horizon with dancing light. Each night the harmonics grew stronger, clearer, more unified. Soon they were no longer just prisoners. They were an army. One evening, as the twin moons rose, a scout creature made of crystalline wings approached Elias. "Human," it said in shimmering tones, "we have found ships." Karthan vessels. Disabled but intact, Elias's breath caught. "How many?" "3. Enough to fly." Lira's faint light brightened beside him. "Then we can leave this world." Elias stared at the horizon, at the ruins of the prison, at the beings who had followed him this far. Leaving would mean more than escape. It would mean taking the fight to the stars. "We're not running," he said finally. "We're taking the sky back." It took weeks to repair the ships. The technology was strange, built on frequency controls and living circuits. But with Lira's understanding and the resonance varied abilities, they transformed the vessels into something new. Hybrids of Karthan design and the chaotic ingenuity of a dozen liberated species. When the first ship rose into the air, the crowd below cheered. The night sky filled with song, thousands of voices harmonizing into one grand note of triumph. Elias stood at the bridge, hands trembling on the controls. The console pulsed beneath his fingers like a heartbeat. Lira floated beside him, radiant again. "Where do we go?" she asked. He looked out into the endless stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, his home. He didn't know if humanity had survived the decade. He didn't know if anyone remembered his name, but he did know this. He was coming back. And when he did, he would not return alone. He smiled faintly. "We go home," he said. "And on the way, we free everyone who still sings in chains." The ships ascended, their light streaking across the Karthan sky like a constellation reborn. The galaxy, silent for centuries under Karthan rule, was about to remember the sound of rebellion, a song born in captivity carried by a human heart. The first light of distant suns touched the hull of the ships as they left the Karthan world behind. Stars stretched before them like rivers of fire, and Elias Vance felt a weight lift from his shoulders, one he hadn't even realized he carried. Freedom, he discovered, was both exhilarating and terrifying. Beside him, Lira floated silently, her skin shimmering faintly gold. "Do you think Earth remembers?" she asked. Elias shook his head. "I don't know. 10 years. A lot can happen in 10 years. But I hope they do." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was filled with possibility. Every ship in the convoy carried prisoners who had sung the song of rebellion, and each of them had a spark, a story waiting to be told. Elias spent hours walking the decks, speaking to them. He learned the names of beings who had once been mere symbols of oppression. Tirael, the being of liquid silver, Mavic, a giant of stone and soft light, and dozens more, each with unique gifts shaped by their species and experiences. And everywhere he went, he reminded them of the truth. The Karthan may have stolen your freedom, but they can't steal your courage. They can't erase who you are. And now together we will show them the strength of what they thought was broken. It was a simple truth, yet he saw it ignite hope in their eyes in ways weapons never could. Weeks passed in hyperspace travel. They navigated broken star charts, dodged Karthan patrols, and avoided systems that had already fallen completely under alien rule. Each encounter strengthened their unity. Each shared story reminded them of the life they were fighting for. Not vengeance, but restoration. During one long night, Elias found himself staring out at the endless void, thinking of Earth. He imagined the forests, the cities, the oceans, things that had once seemed ordinary but now felt almost mythical. Lira appeared beside him, her voice a soft hum. "Do you think they survived?" Elias nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "They had to. Humans always survive. Even when the world breaks them, they find a way back." He paused, then added quietly, "And if they didn't, then we'll rebuild what they lost." She touched his hand, and he felt a pulse of warmth, an affirmation that this journey was no longer just his. It belonged to all of them. The first encounter with the Karthan outside the prison was subtle. A scout vessel appeared on the horizon, sleek in silver, almost invisible against the backdrop of stars. The fleet of freed prisoners prepared for combat, but Elias stopped them. "No," he said. "We're not soldiers yet. We're teachers. We're survivors. Let them see us first." Lira's eyes widened. "You mean?" "Yes," he replied. "We show them what freedom sounds like." They let the Karthan come closer, their scouts scanning, unaware of the harmonic shields that pulsed with silent strength. And when the Karthan tried to strike, the resonance erupted. It wasn't destruction, it was a song. A wave of sound, tuned through every being aboard the ships, carrying every story of imprisonment, resilience, and hope. The Karthan vessels faltered, their control systems trembling. For the first time in centuries, a human heart had turned the Karthan's power back on them. When the battle ended, if it could be called that, Elias looked across the fleet of liberated prisoners. They were no longer just survivors. They were a force that could rewrite the galaxy's history. Yet Elias felt something heavier than triumph. The journey ahead was immense. The Karthan Empire spanned systems, fleets, and worlds. What had begun with a single prison was now a war to awaken the stars themselves. Lira hovered close, her glow brightening. "Are you afraid?" He considered, it the weight of 10 years of captivity pressing against his ribs like iron. Then he shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "Fear isn't ours to carry anymore. We have hope, and hope is stronger than fear." A chorus of resonance echoed his sentiment, their voices carrying across the fleet in perfect unity. And as the stars stretched before them, Elias knew this truth in his bones. The Karthan would not see them coming. Not as prisoners, not as rebels, but as an unstoppable symphony of freedom. The vastness of space stretched before Elias Vance, unbroken and infinite. Every star, every glimmer of distant worlds reminded him that humanity's reach and humanity's responsibility was far greater than a single prison, a single planet. Yet in the quiet of the bridge, as the ships hummed in formation, Elias felt the weight of his own heart more acutely than ever. 10 years of solitude, 10 years of fear and survival, had left scars that no victory could erase. Lira hovered beside him, her glow steady but soft. "Do you ever think about them?" she asked gently. "Every day," Elias admitted. His eyes drifted to the farthest point on the console, imagining Earth. My parents, my friends, the ones who might have waited, the ones who might not have. Her hand brushed his arm, and for a moment the vastness of space shrank to a pulse of shared understanding. "You carried them here," she said softly. "In every step you've taken, every note you've sung, every plan you've made, that is your strength." Elias swallowed, feeling the truth of it. Humans, he realized, were not the strongest species. They didn't have the most advanced weapons or the most perfect technology. But they had something even the Karthan could not replicate, the courage to hope when all else is lost. The next system they encountered bore the scars of the Karthan's conquest. Worlds stripped of life, oceans drained, skies choked with silver clouds. Elias's stomach tightened at the sight. "Do they know what we are?" Lira asked. Elias shook his head. "They will." He gathered the resonance, standing at the forefront of the fleet, and raised his voice, not just as a human, but as a symbol of what resilience could achieve. "Look around you," he said. "See what they tried to erase. See what they thought could never rise again. We are more than prisoners. We are more than survivors. We are the spark of hope they tried to extinguish. And now, we carry it to every corner of the galaxy." The resonance responded, their harmonics weaving into a tapestry of sound that reached across the stars. Even in the void, the song of freedom could be heard, touching those who had long forgotten what it meant to live. The first battle beyond the prison came suddenly. A Karthan fleet, larger than anything Elias had imagined, emerged from a system cloud like silver phantoms. Their ships gleamed with cold precision, firing pulses designed to disrupt resonance itself. "Hold formation," Elias ordered. His hand trembled slightly on the controls, not from fear but from the awareness of what was at stake. Lira placed her hand on his shoulder. "You've carried hope this far," she reminded him. "Now let it lead." Elias closed his eyes, feeling the harmonic threads he had nurtured in the prison stretch outward through the fleet. He reached deep into his memory, recalling every lesson of frequency, resonance, and harmony. Then with a breath that felt like the first one he had taken in years, he sang. It was not words. It was not a weapon. It was a heart. The sound pulsed through the fleet, bending Karthan pulses, disrupting their formations. Their weapons faltered, their ships staggered, and the fleet that had seemed invincible shuddered before the simple truth of human courage amplified by unity. When the battle ended, Elias hovered over the bridge in stunned silence. The Karthan had retreated, but not without leaving behind devastation. Yet for every scarred world and every broken ship, there was life surviving, hidden, waiting, ready to join the chorus. He looked to Lira. "We've begun," he said softly. "But the real work is just starting." "Do you think humanity is ready for the galaxy?" she asked. Elias smiled faintly, a weary but unwavering light in his eyes. "Humanity doesn't wait to be ready. They rise, they endure, they fight in the quietest moments when no one is watching. That's what makes them human." The fleet moved onward, a symphony of diverse voices bound by one purpose. Each ship carried the story of a world that had suffered, and each crew carried the promise that no chain could last forever. Elias, once a prisoner, now a beacon, realized that the heart of humanity was not just in its strength or ingenuity. It was in its refusal to be silenced, in its relentless hope, and in its willingness to carry others toward the light. And with that truth at his core, he knew the galaxy would never forget the sound of the human heart. The blue dot hung in the distance like a fragile jewel. Elias Vance had seen it only in memory for 10 years. He had dreamed of it in the silence of alien walls, sketched it in dust, whispered its name to the stars. And now, from the bridge of a fleet of freed prisoners and allies, he saw it again. Earth, It was smaller than he imagined. The ocean shimmered beneath thin clouds. The continents glimmered with forests, deserts, and cities he once knew. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the hum of resonance flowing through the fleet, flowing through him, connecting every being who had sung the song of freedom. "We're home," Lira whispered beside him, her light soft and steady. "Yes," Elias replied, voice raw with emotion. "But we didn't come here to arrive quietly. We came to remind the galaxy that humans, and every voice they've freed, cannot be silenced." The fleet descended toward Earth cautiously. Years of Karthan rule had left marks. Military satellites damaged, communications disrupted, planetary systems weakened. Elias's heart ached with the knowledge that home had endured its own struggles without him. He reached out to humanity's surviving forces. With harmonic signals, those same resonant frequencies that had shattered the Karthan prison, he broadcasted a message. "We are here. We are free, and we bring all who have waited too long to be heard." From space stations, hidden ships, and secret colonies, humans began to respond. Signals flared across frequencies, lights pulsed, and messages of reunion poured in. Elias smiled faintly, the weight of a decade lifting from his shoulders. He had fought in silence for 10 years, but the voices of millions now joined him in song. Then came the Karthan. A fleet larger and more imposing than any prison guard approached the solar system, their ships bristling with weapons and pulsing frequencies designed to drown out life itself. Elias didn't panic. He had learned something that the Karthan had never understood. Power was not just in control, it was in unity. He raised his hand, and the fleet of resonance, humans, and allies responded in perfect harmony. Ships, bodies, and beings across the galaxy pulsed with synchronized vibrations, each note striking a chord of defiance. The Karthan fired, but the resonance shielded every ship, every life, and even bent the enemy frequencies back upon them. Their fleet faltered, their harmony shattered by the very strength they had sought to suppress. Elias's voice cut through the chaos, amplified by every ally around him. "The galaxy belongs to the living, to those who dream, who endure, who rise. Hear us, Karthan. Hear the song of the free." The sound washed over the enemy, overwhelming their precision, dismantling their attacks, and shattering their command. One by one, their vessels retreated, and the survivors fled into the void. As silence returned, Elias gazed upon Earth. The planet had survived. Humanity had endured, and now, together with allies from countless worlds, they would rebuild. He descended in the lead ship, touching down near a familiar coastline. The wind carried the scent of ocean and grass, scents that had haunted his memory for 10 long years. Children ran to the shoreline, their laughter echoing like music. Adults lifted their eyes skyward, marveling at the fleet descending in triumphant formation. Elias stepped onto the soil of his home world. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the reality of Earth beneath him. Lira approached, her small form glowing, and whispered, "This is what you dreamed for." Elias smiled, tears streaking his face. "Not just for me, for all of us. For every voice that was silenced, for every heart that refused to break." Over the next months, the galaxy witnessed a new era. Humans and their allies restored systems, freed enslaved worlds, and built a coalition that was stronger than any empire. The Karthan threat remained, but its power had been broken. Elias traveled from planet to planet, sharing stories of resilience, teaching the song of hope, and reminding everyone he met that even the smallest voice could ignite a revolution. And finally, he returned home fully, standing beneath the familiar stars that once watched him suffer. He whispered to the sky, "We endured. We returned. And we will never be silent again." The stars seemed to pulse in answer, as if the universe itself had listened and remembered. In that moment, Elias Vance, once a prisoner, now a liberator, understood the truth. Humanity's greatest power was not its technology, not its strength, but its unyielding spirit. And that spirit had just begun to sing.